Hey there, my name's Effie Zahos. I'm the Chief Content Officer and Money Expert at InvestSMART.
Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information. Effie, thank you for taking some time to join me on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Owen. It's been a while since I'm on your show, so it's always good to be invited back.
Yes, it's wonderful to have you here. And we're going to talk about everything from investing, budgeting, saving, maybe even getting some property in this conversation. So it's going to be a bit of everything for everyone, which is wonderful. But basically everyone that listens to the show will know of you. I've seen you on the TV, we've heard you on the podcasts, just all around the traps, and know that you're a wealth of knowledge. You've written books, so much that you do. So I'm hoping we can boil it down into a few icebreakers to kick things off. What's the hardest thing you've ever done to save money?
It's not so much about the money side of things. I think when it comes to saving, I think the hardest thing for most people, and it was for myself right at the beginning, was actually making that change. Because it isn't about, I always say that when it comes to money, it's not about dollars and cents. It's more that the mindset that you have, wanting to make that change. That's really hard to do. Once you do it, it's easy, but it's just making that initial step. And having said that, I mean, if you want an example, my hardest thing was to sell my beloved first car. And I have written about this. It was a red Mazda MX-5. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. My parents did not buy it. I took out a loan, which is probably the worst thing to do. But in hindsight, it's probably the best thing because it forced me to save. It taught me about the reverse of compound interest, and I paid it off in that year. But I actually did sell it in the end because it was expensive to run and basically made some good money out of it. And that really helped me and got me on my way, as well as investing in shares to buy my first property.
Well, that's really interesting. I myself took out a personal loan to buy my first car, and it turned out it was a ute, and I didn't need it because I was studying, and I ended up selling it. I didn't make a profit, but I learned the lesson that it is very expensive when you have a car loan.
It is, and I think a lot more people are looking in that because during COVID, we all kind of bought cars, we didn't want public transport and so on. And it's quite expensive to run a car. So look, it's definitely a tip for young people if they can get away with, not having a car. It's one way to save on costs.
Oh, for sure. And as you said, if you've got a goal of buying a house or something like that in your future, going overseas, you don't want to be paying a car loan back home. So what's one of the easier things that you've done to save money?
Automate it. No brainer. Automate it. I always treat my investing or saving like a bill. Once you do it, it's out of mind, out of sight, and it's pain-free. So that's a no-brainer, that if you are building up a saving strategy or an investment strategy, you just need to treat it like a subscription. And I always say this, that, when you have subscriptions, we never not miss our Netflix payment or our Stan or whatever your vice is. So if you kind of put that mindset that you're investing is a subscription or you're saving, that's the easiest thing to do.
It's like one of those, put the big rocks in the jar first. The first thing that goes in is like, here's my long-term self. Yeah. That's the investing.
But it's been hard to do that over the last several years. I mean, when you think about, and we spoke a little bit about this offline before, that the past 3 years or so, we've just been focused on living. We've been focused on how am I going to actually pay the bills? How am I going to put food on the table? And so for a lot of us, saving has just been thrown out the window. And I get that. And I think we need to be a little bit kind with ourselves. That's okay too. But now, hopefully, I might be, overstepping the mark here a little bit. But look, the possibility of rate cuts towards the end of the year, we've got all our, indicators coming through and they're being on track. It may be now time to look at that neglected side of our balance sheets and start bringing a bit of love back into building wealth.
One final icebreaker I've got for you is, it seems like I can't get in an Uber these days without some type of investment tip coming to me. I'm curious of one of the more unlikely places you've got an investment tip or a recommendation.
I mean, for sure, an Uber driver, a taxi driver, whatever they've actually sometimes have some great tips. Mine was a car salesperson. A friend of mine actually was all over Bitcoin. So telling me, pull it all out of your super and then set up an SMSF and, invest in Bitcoin. The thing is that gets me really upset is that when he said this, Bitcoin was, I think at the beginning of the year, it was like $66 or something like that. And now it's gone through the roof. I've got to go back to him and just see how his portfolio, but I definitely did not do that. So, I still have a bit of problem with crypto in that what is the underlying asset there? It's hard for me to get my head wrapped around that. But, I love you. I love you. I love the enthusiasm. But, that was the tip.
Yeah, sometimes it's just as important to know what not to invest in. So we were talking earlier this morning about your schedule, getting up in the morning, presenting on the telly, and then coming to work, 9 to 5 here at InvestSMART. You do so much and you've educated so many people over so many years. And I'm just curious, like, people see you now and they see you and they're like, well, she can talk about automation, she can talk about investing. But I think we all have this journey with money and people don't always appreciate it just because we're here talking about this. We may not have necessarily come to money in the healthiest way. And even though we're out here talking to people, maybe we had a different journey and that's defined who we are. And I think there's often a lot of kind of like smoke and mirrors around some of this stuff. I'm just curious how your journey with money and investing began and how that's taken shape for you.
And that's such a great point, Owen, because I find even now with social platforms, there is so much information and everybody saying, I'm saving thousands, millions, I did this and did that. And it can make you feel like, I'm nowhere near that. I'm not doing as good. So for me, it's like, put all that noise outside. Personal finance is called personal for a reason. It's what you can do for yourself. And I always say, the grass may look green on the other side, but it's probably fake. It's about making the best of what you have. And for me, and I think this is a saying, it's definitely in my book, like, my greatest fear is retiring in a polyester outfit and drinking cask wine. And a lot of people, when I say that to them, they laugh, but there's actually a very serious side to that. I grew up, my parents migrated from Greece. Financial literacy was not something that they were were fortunate to have. I had a mother that was pulled out of school in year 2 to support her brothers. That's year 2. She did not have an education. So they did the best they can. But for me, my fear is that, I'm fortunate. I have a good job here. I'm a journalist. I'm not on a ridiculous, salary in that sense, but I make the best of what I have. I'm not complaining. It's good. But it's all about becoming the best financial version of yourself. So, look, did I do everything right? No, absolutely not. It took me a while to wake up myself, but I love what I do. I mean, you'd have to. I mean, what other crazy person would get up at 4:30 in the morning? And a lot of people think that my main role is Today Show. It's not. I love that platform. I love the Today Show. They do such a great job. But I do have another job as well. I have a few jobs because I love what I do and I love the different platforms and being able to talk to people on different levels and finding out what's happening here, over here, and versus that and so on. But, I probably had my best tip come from Paul Clitheroe, who's the chairman of InvestSMART. And I remember, getting a job with him, and his tip to me was basically just resonates right now. It's not what you earn that counts. It's what you spend. And I think once I started working in this area, I became basically practicing what I preach as well. But yeah, you do stuff up. Of course you do. I can go on a spending binge just like the best of them. But for me, it's all about balance as well. If I set up everything, and this is the key thing, and that's why I thought your first question was really good. The hardest part about saving is just doing it. Once that's set up, and once I, have my goals, I have my buckets, I automatically invest and build my wealth. I love super, and if someone at my age, you should. Then I can splurge if I've got that money, I can splurge. I give my permission to splurge. And let's face it, we're not here forever as well.
Yeah. It's that balance. You're so right, isn't it? So people who have followed you over the years will be familiar that you were previously director of InvestSMART, and now you've moved into the business each day. Can you tell us about what you do day to day?
So I was on the board for 3 years as an independent director, and it was a great opportunity. I loved it. Great mindset on that board, and you could see the business from one side, but then I could also see, I want to roll my sleeves up. I want to get a bit dirty in here. I want to kind of jump into this. And most of my career has been focused on personal finance and more so on home loans, on saving on everyday items, which I still love. That's the bread and butter. You've got to get that right. If you don't get that right, if you can't budget, then how are you going to move to the next level of actually trying to build wealth? But like I said to you, the past 3 years or so, we haven't been really focusing too much on investing because most households, let's face it, have been juggling 13 rate hikes, trying to just get the basics through, trying to just pay the bills. And it's come at a cost of our long-term wealth. So for me, it was exciting to jump in this role and then revisit, I guess, what I do in the personal finance space, but more so on the investing side. I mean, my ultimate goal would be to see young kids investing at a young age, not in a bank account. I mean, bank accounts have their roles, don't get me wrong, but building wealth, whether it is exchange traded funds, whether, they want to go directly into shares, but just building some wealth. Because I think also with property, it's so expensive. The entry point is harder to get into, but I'm also optimistic. I'm not saying that you can't invest in property. You absolutely can if you start saving and investing as soon as you possibly can, because it's all about, as you would say, time in the market, not timing it. So I'd like that to be more common knowledge. I mean, sitting on the board of director with Extras as well, we do have a great program about Talk Money. It's going through schools. About 260,000 students have gone through that. I would just like, investing to roll off the tongue like saving on your home loan or make sure if you're checking your car insurance, you're comparing. When it comes to your money, where's the best place? What am I going to get the best deal out of? And make that part of the conversation in investing.
I'd like to talk about property in just a moment, actually, because I know you've got some stories that you can share around this and some strategies. But in terms of investing, if we just confine it to, say, the stock market or ETFs and these types of thing, what are some simple steps that people can take if they are in that situation where maybe they have neglected it for a little while and they do want to do more? Yeah.
I think it's important to understand the roles that these have. So we talk about, ETFs. Well, what is an ETF? A lot of people still are not sure of that and don't understand it. And that's okay too, because if you don't know something, that would you're hesitant to jump into it. So it's always get that knowledge, get that understanding around it. And you can get that at MoneySmart, the government website. InvestSmart's got some great basic information on what are ETFs. But I think reporting season, for me, is a great nudge for a lot of people to kind of take a bit of interest as to what is happening out there in the market. We do have bank accounts, so what does it mean when they're saying billions of profits, dividends are being paid? You may shop at, say, Woolworths and what's happening there. In a lot of cases, it may pay to own the bank than have your money in the bank. So it's a nice little nudge for me to start thinking, well, hold it, I should be taking a bit more interest here. I'm spending my money at these places. Is there a better way I can get more bang out of my buck for this?
I love that curiosity that people have, just scratch it and see what it is out in the investing or finance world and just see where it can take you. I think once it catches on, people kind of become just immersed in, well, what can I do with my money? Even if I've only got, a few $1,000s, a few $100s $50. Like, what can I do with my money?
And right now, I get why you may not want to take that risk. I can understand that when I can get a bank account, say, at 5 or 6%, and that's fine too. But if we're talking rates may go down towards the end of the year, your bank account may not pay that all the time. So this is why it's important to kind of get a bit savvy as to what alternatives you can have other than just cash.
One of the things that InvestSMART in particular sometimes gets, I'll say, lumped in with, which is this idea of quote unquote robo-advice, which for some people, they probably imagine like a computer that's something like a robot like Elon Musk would be making, and it's bopping away on a keyboard. Can you just maybe explain to us the idea of a quote-unquote robo-advisor and what they do? You mentioned the pizza analogy before, but just in a simple kind of like neat way, how do you explain it to someone that has no idea about any of that stuff?
Yeah, and that's a fair call, because you think when it comes to advice, you've got your financial advisors, and if you can afford that, that's great. I think everyone, at least once in their life, should see a financial advisor. I can't wait till we kind of get through a bit of this red tape and just make it a little bit more affordable for everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Ideally, I'd love to see the initial consultation be a tax deduction, but we're a little way off from that. Then the next step is what you were just saying, a robo-advisor. So it's not really, a computer there talking to you as such. At InvestSMART, what we do have is what we call an investment quiz, officially like a statement of advice. You go in there and basically put, what are you saving for? How long are you saving for? And it matches basically your risk profile to what could be a great portfolio for you. So there is some interaction there, is basically, again, it's that nudge to get you thinking. What's your risk appetite? What are you looking for? How long have you got to save? And these are the portfolios that could match that. And then it's up to you if you want to take it or not.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because a lot of people, that's kind of the missing link is a lot of people, we hear people on podcasts or wherever you're consuming information, you hear things like, oh yeah, it's based on your risk profile or your time horizon. You think, those are a lot of like abstract concepts for even finance people to think about, let alone people that didn't study finance. And so to wrap it up in a neat quiz like that, it just makes it a bit more concrete for people. Oh, this is actually what I am. I'm a high growth investor. I'm defensive, or whatever the case may be.
And it gives you those prompters, because you're right. Because if I just say to you, what's your risk profile? Well, what does that mean? So it gives you those, the questions you need, you answer it, and then it does the work for you. Also, I guess when it comes to investing, it is, it's hard to pick that ETF, because there are so many. And you just hear that word ETF, but there are so many asset classes that you could be tracking or overseas, international, and so on. So it kind of just narrows it down for you. And you could go directly into an ETF. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. Or you can get, like I said, serve me up a pizza pie here with all the little asset classes to give me even greater diversity and not just have one ETF provider.
I know that Kate, who you know, she's a big fan of, if you can limit your choices to 3 or something like that. A lot of the study seems to suggest that you're going to have a better time of making that decision, because analysis paralysis is a big problem. And I think a lot of the way the finance industry has gone over the last few years has been like, here's 10,000 different things you could invest in, go and pick one. And you sit there and you scratch your head and you're thinking, which one do I go with first?
And half the time you won't probably do anything. And that is worse. That fear of jumping in is just as bad as fear of missing out. And that investor paralysis, it's all too much, I'm just going to stay here. And before you know it, it'll be the end of 2024 and you still haven't jumped in.
And that's why having options like that, where it's like, just take a simple quiz and we'll give you some ideas that could suit you, which is just great. So you mentioned property before. Property, we're recording here in Sydney, which is probably like the hotbed for this conversation, but it applies all around Australia. I'm hearing from people from like even regional areas, towns I can't even pronounce, say the same thing. That getting into the property market is a challenge. How do you think about this? You've got to talk about this a lot, but just generally, how are you thinking about this right now?
There's no denying that getting into the property market is extremely hard. And here's the risk. For me, property is forced savings, just like super. And Aussies are pretty much in general, I'm being stereotyping here, not good at saving, but boy, are we good at paying off debt, which is why property works. And we tend to understand this asset class a lot more. And you're saying, yes, we're here today in Sydney and the median dwelling is about 1.2. That's median dwellings. That's a house and unit. I mean, if you're just looking at a house, it's even crazier. And CoreLogic data shows that they've had consecutive jumps each month in property prices. I think Hobart was one that dipped last month. And then you've got forecasters, and everyone's got a crystal ball, but they're still saying 4 or 5% growth, and in some areas I'm seeing even more than that, because I do have a 23-year-old that's been gazumped twice on property in Canberra, and it's heartbreaking. She's definitely hasn't come to the bank of mum and dad here. She's just basically taken the most she possibly can as a first home buyer. So for that is stamp duty concessions, getting the most on that, jumping in with a 5% deposit on the home guarantee scheme, avoiding lenders' mortgage insurance, buying a one-bedroom dingy apartment. It's definitely not a castle, but your first home wouldn't be. Of course it wouldn't be. And it's a unit, not a house. So I like to be a bit optimistic when it comes to property. Yes, we just said that Sydney was at 1.1 million dwelling, but you're not buying the medium dwelling house. You're probably not buying a house. You may go in as a unit, but then you've got other obstacles as well. You do have strata fees. Now, they've gone up about 20 or 30%. A 5K strata fee is going to lower your borrowing power by about $50,000. You throw in HEX that it was indexed at 7.1 last year. Hopefully that figure, when we get the latest CPI data, will come down to around 4.5, 5. But that's going to drop your borrowing power by about $50,000 on the average salary. If you've got a car loan, that's another 50. You've already lost 150,000 in borrowing power before you even go out. So there are so many obstacles. I get it with people jumping into the property market, but it is taking advantage of what's about, not looking at these headline, average prices. You are not going to buy a place right in the middle of the city. You probably a unit over a house. There's a 45% premium between house prices and unit prices. So there are ways to get in there. And again, it's that case of research, jumping in if you can tick all those boxes and you can sustain that liability.
You mentioned something off air before, which is a really interesting data point around the difference between young men and women.
Yeah. And this kind of relates to investing as well. So this data came out from CoreLogic. It was off the back of International Women's Day, and they did some research into property ownership between genders, and they found that Gen Z, so 18 to 29-year-olds, there were about 27% of female ownership in that age bracket, as opposed to men being at 52%. So that's a big gap, isn't it?
Difference.
Yeah. Overall, things kind of, flatten out over time. But why that was alarming to me, and this applies just in the investment world as well, the sooner you get in, the more you've got time for, for things to compound and so on. The same applies with property. There's a couple of insights and reasons why. So let me break it down. Probably they saw that women's income was a little bit lower in that age bracket as well. And that was probably more to do with the fact that women, and especially in Australia, are the highest educated in the world, but probably going to uni, probably working part-time and so on. So there could be some explanations as to why that income is different. Could be wage gap as well, gender wage gap. But the unfortunate thing here is that if women are buying property later, they miss that growth period earlier on. And the same goes when you're investing. If you jump in earlier, magic of compound interest, dollar cost averaging, if you're saving little, save often, and so on.
It's really interesting because we all want to buy a property, it seems. Some people don't. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But we all want that as kind of like a way to secure our financial future. It's almost like it's the home, it's the base for your lifestyle, but it can also be the base for your for your money. And as you said, the sooner you can build that base, the more it will grow for you.
And just jumping in on that, there are so many. I guess this market has been flooded by products and strategies to help people go in there. I can tell you now, you can lay buy a home loan for $10,000. You can, the federal government's rent to buy scheme, well, that's got so many flaws in it as well. there is nothing really here addressing that supply issue, and really just confuses the market even more. And we know the more complicated you make a product, the less likely it's going to be used.
How about in terms of, say, someone's in this camp, they're saving for a first home. Could they be investing?
Yeah, you absolutely could. Again, it comes down to if you've already got a nice sizable cash deposit and you want to jump in, say, at the end of this year or next year, you may not want to invest because of the time frame's not there. But ideally, you want to be saving in the asset class that you're buying. In that way, if it's going up, so's your investment as well. So for me, I'd be speaking to an expert and maybe looking at a bit of everything. Why not take advantage of saving in your super? The concession or contributions that you make are only taxed at 15%. Why not then get a high online saver account while you still can at 5 to 6%, and then look at an ETF that may have a bit of property in there as well to match the asset class you're buying. Mix and match your strategies so you can shave some of that time frame off saving for a deposit.
I'd like to double click on women and investing really quickly. What do you think it is, and maybe there's data that you have here at InvestSMART, what do you think it is that sometimes holds women back, in particular, from investing?
We did we took a deep dive into our data here, and we found that women have the traits to be a successful investor.
Absolutely.
Research so well. Don't overtrade. I think men were trading 1.9 times more. And, there are lots of research, not just at InvestSMART, that support that, if you do overtrade, it can work against you. Not just the fees of jumping in and out, but also just missing the timing, being out of the market and so on. So we do all that so well. Where we may do better is aligning our risk profile, which then goes back to, this quiz that we have at InvestSMART to actually nail what are you really aligned to when it comes to your risk appetite. And probably preferred a conservative portfolio. And I see that too with a lot of women in their super as well.
Yeah.
They're 50 years of age and think, oh my goodness, I'm 50, I've got to go right down to conservative. Well, you've probably got, I hate to say, another 15 years of work ahead of you. I think you could up it a little bit. Yeah. Again, speak to an advisor or even your super fund because they've got limited advice that you can talk to. But the data we saw at InvestSMART showed that if you opt for, say, something conservative versus a high growth, that's about a 3% difference. And on average portfolio, looking at ASX data, which was around the $95,000 mark, you're missing out on $55,000. So it's so important in any investment that you're going into that you get the asset allocation right. And the same goes with your portfolios. The same will go, your share fund invests in your super invests in shares too. So that's got the same thing, conservative, balance and growth. You've got to get all that right and match it, which is so important.
Yeah, for sure.
To find out, well, what is my risk profile? Who can help me? How can I do this?
Yeah. One of the things that there's a saying that I love, that everyone's a high growth investor until the next market crash.
Yes.
And that particularly applies to the gentlemen that may be listening to this, and myself included. We all think it's great and we're going to go for growth and all these things. And then
it's funny.
We miss out on all that compounding when we freak out.
I've veered my kids towards high growth ETFs, and sometimes they love me. Sometimes they purposely think I'm sabotaging them because they say, Mum, what are you in? Probably more towards the balance with some high growth, but I put the whole lot for you in high growth.
And it's just about knowing that and being aware of that, right? And I think sometimes we fail to zoom out and think, well, my goal is actually in 20 years. So how do I think about that? There's going to be some bumps along the way.
Yeah.
I want to get this right now so that when those bumps come, I'm a bit more comfortable. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of people, when they do those risk profiles, they think it's just a lot of like mystery. It's kind of like a black box. You put your numbers in, and there's some really simple versions of them online, but they don't really capture what you're trying to do, which is how am I actually really going to react when things get a little scary? Because those are the most important times to stay invested, which is really interesting for a lot of people.
And that's the hard thing, because human nature is we want to work the other way around, don't we? When you look at, what happened during COVID, and we've talked about this before. The markets fell right down to 4,000 points or something, and now what are they, over 7,000?
Yeah, near all-time highs.
And you just think, at that moment, what were you thinking? Instead of, I'll just keep plodding away, putting in slowly, saving little, saving often. A lot of people probably thinking, no, I've got to rip this out because I'm panicking. So it is that if you can kind of not let the fear of the market get to you.
You mentioned basically in a roundabout way, you mentioned like the habits that people have formed a few years ago and how challenging it has been since COVID for people to deal with. Okay, interest rates are really low. Now interest rates are high. There was high inflation. There was people's like wage uncertainty. Dealing with all of those headlines and those big data points, it actually hit home.
It didn't, but inflation's still high. When you look at the cost of living index, that's hitting at 6.9.
True.
So we get this CPI number, and that's heading downwards, but that doesn't factor in interest rates, the inflation basket, whereby your cost of living index does. So I always talk about what's your personal inflation rate, and you'll know it, you'll feel it.
Oh yeah.
So if you've got a mortgage, you're at that 6.9. You're not getting any kind of love when people say, "Oh, it's moving right in the right direction." If you're a self-funded retiree that owns their home, you're living the financial dream right now.
Yep.
I don't think we'll get back to this cheap money again. Maybe it'll take another pandemic for us to get this cheap money. So I think for a lot of people, what we got to understand that even if your rates do fall down, prior to this pandemic, we had the cash rate go up, we had the cash rate go down. It never kind of stayed in one place. So I don't want to get people's hopes up, or we shouldn't get up our own hopes that,
For sure.
You've always got to be savvy with your money. And I think we have learned some great money lessons out of this that we will continue on moving forward.
And that's kind of where I was going to go with that is maintaining those financial habits is so important. Like even when my mainland vintage cheese is up over $10 at Woolies, and that's my personal CPI indicator. Maybe I do have to put that off, every second shop or something like that. But how do we maintain the habit of staying invested and like investing, like actively still investing during these times?
Yeah, I guess for those of us who haven't, because our budgets didn't allow, it's going back and looking at those budgets now. I would look at my budget at least twice a year. And we've also got a situation where our household bills are constantly changing. Insurances, unfortunately, will continue to go up. So, your home, car and contents insurance, if you've got those, they've probably gone 20 to 30% up. And we'll continue to have, unfortunately, floods, fires and so on. Reinsurance between them is high. So these are bills that are always have room to maneuver. And by that I mean you've got an opportunity to claw back some savings. I guess once you've got your household budget sorted, and that does require a bit of review, your discretionary spending needs to come under the microscope. We're doing a fairly good job on that. It's then, do I have the capacity to start investing? And that's where you need to strike when the iron's hot. That's where you need to set it up and make a choice. Well, where am I going to invest? How am I going to do that? If it is through ETFs, how do I start? And then for those of us who have been doing it all this time, well, that's great. Congratulations. Just make sure you're in the right asset class and you're continuing to do what you're doing.
Yeah, little bits, lots of times, even in these times of uncertainty. People that listen to this show will know that InvestSMART is a sponsor of the program, which is wonderful. And they may also know that Rask recently went into partnership with InvestSMART, which is an absolutely wonderful thing, and I'm delighted. So hopefully we'll see more of each other in the future. But folks can head to the InvestSMART website where they can find this quiz, which I would highly encourage anyone that's watching or listening to this to do that, because this is probably the bit that you've been missing.
Yeah.
I feel like, Effie, a lot of people know that they should invest. They just need a little bit of guidance to say, this is probably the type of thing that you should be looking at. Whereas due to regulations and all this red tape you mentioned, it's been very difficult to do that. Whereas a simple quiz like this can point you in the right direction. So please, if you're listening to this, go and check it out. There will be a link available in the show notes, as well as to learn more about Effie and all the wonderful work that she does. But Effie, I thought I'd maybe end, we started with the icebreakers, maybe we can end with a bit of fun.
We will, but before we get there, can I just say what caught my eye when I came over to InvestSMART? Yes, the statement of advice, the quiz, definitely, no brainer. I've done that, doesn't take long, really good. I also like the fact they've got a boot camp. They've got an
the
investment
boot camp
course, which I really love. Tom and the guys there have done a brilliant job putting that together. Because for me, knowledge is power. So I was excited about that one. And also just the calculators. I'm a big fan of graphics for the Today Show and putting calculators together and so on, and graphs. Some great calculators on, okay, I want to save for a house. What does that mean? Or my kids' education. I want to go on a holiday. So they've got some great little tools there. And another one, if you are interested in ETFs and want to see what they're rated, the InvestSMART actually does have an ETF report that you can download for free and get the ratings and performances on that as well. Yes. So there come some of the tools I like on the site.
You know what? There was always Kate Campbell, former employee of InvestSMART, for those of you that don't know. Her and I would often just look through the site and see all the tools that were available that we kind of didn't even know existed. And there's so many wonderful tools. So we've only talked about a couple of them today.
Yeah.
But they're all, like, most of them are freely available. So go and use them and check it out, because it's all been built by a team that's done it for such a long time. It's wonderful. So we'll put links into all of that stuff.
Great. Sorry, you're going to get the fun stuff.
Oh, yes,
I can't believe
No. You got to the important stuff. I'll just keep it with this game I'd like to play with you, which is just, I've got 5 things here. It's just a little better buy segment. So what you would rather buy, right? Okay. So ETFs or direct shares?
Oh, ETFs.
ETFs, okay.
Only because they're easier, but I do have direct shares.
Yes, I know you do. Yes, great.
I'm torn.
Great. Now this is not so much a better buy, but how you would buy it.
Yeah.
So Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Would you buy it monthly or would you pay for the annual package?
Neither. Get rid of it. Don't have subscriptions. They're costing you too much.
Okay.
No. Look, monthly sounds cheap. Times it by 12. It kills the yearly. So you're better off buying yearly. But
Yep. Okay. I like it. Now this is going to maybe invoke some, I guess, parochial, some like local feelings. A Barossa Valley Shiraz or the Mornington Peninsula Pinot. Drink responsibly.
Both.
Okay. Next one. You introduced me to this idea of a bachelor handbag. I didn't know if this was just something you'd made up, but then I realized it was not. So a bachelor handbag is?
That is the chicken at your grocery store.
Yes. Okay.
Chicken in a bag.
Chicken in a bag. So you've got a $10 budget. Yeah. Would you get the bachelor handbag or a lentil shepherd's pie? Love
myself a bachelor, if I have to say so.
Okay. It goes with many things.
But with the bachelor, just wait. Every 4 hours in some of these supermarkets, they've got to take them off the shelves because they've been on there too long. You'll be able to get it less than $10.
Okay, wonderful. Look at that.
You might get food poisoning.
Just be careful.
Just be careful.
Okay, finally, would you rather go on a 7-day camping holiday or a 3-night major city hotel stay?
Okay, what's the catch?
Well, you could probably fit a longer camping trip.
Is it glamping or is it just a camp?
Yes, let's say you've got a caravan.
Oh, come on, Owen. Of course I'm going to take the city break.
Oh, okay. With kids.
Oh, you didn't say that.
Okay, if we go with kids.
No way. We're going with the kids. Okay. I'm staying home and they can go.
Okay, send them off separately. I like that. So I love this. And I love that you've just demonstrated in this simple little quiz, like some of the ways you can save money without doing anything different. And if I just go back to the first question, which was the most important about ETFs versus direct shares, I think more and more people are opening their horizons to having both ETFs and shares in their investment portfolio. And I think there are many wonderful ways to do that. People can head to the InvestSMART website and learn more about both of those things through the bootcamp or just through the free tools that are available. So, Effie, this has been heaps of fun. It's always fun when I get to chat to you. So thank you for taking the time out.
Thanks, Owen. And congratulations on the partnership.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.